The radio crackled. Contact, ridgeline, 1,100 meters. Staff Sergeant Kira Dalton didn't move. Her breathing remained unchanged. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds out. The same rhythm she'd maintained for the past 40 minutes behind the Barrett M82A1. Through the scope, heat shimmer distorted the air above the Afghan Valley floor. Temperature 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind 6.2 miles per hour, quartering left to right. Barometric pressure dropping. Weather system moving in from the north. The mountains rose around her like broken teeth against an impossibly blue sky. Somewhere below, 6 Navy SEALs were counting on her. Men who'd spent the last 3 days watching her with barely concealed skepticism. Men who thought a woman couldn't make this shot. They were about to learn otherwise. Her finger rested outside the trigger guard. The figure on the distant ridge was small, dark against brown rock. At this distance, he was theoretical. A mathematical problem waiting to be solved. The Barrett's effective range was 1,800 meters. She'd made shots at 2,100, but that was on flat ranges with spotters, ballistic computers, unlimited prep time. This was different. This was combat. This was a human life in her crosshairs, and another life depending on whether she could end it. Dalton. The voice in her ear belonged to Petty Officer First Class Rowan Webb, lying beside her in the dirt. His tone carried doubt wrapped in professional courtesy. "You're up." Kira's heart rate was 58 beats per minute. She'd checked that morning, same as every morning. The Garmin on her wrist tracked everything: sleep cycles, stress markers, recovery metrics. In her world, the body was machinery. You maintained it, monitored it, trusted it only as far as the data allowed. She adjusted her cheek weld against the stock. The scope's reticle settled on the leftmost figure. He was moving slowly, weapons slung, scanning the valley below. Not tactical, not trained. Local militia, probably, or Taliban spotter. It didn't matter for the math. "Winds shifting," Webb muttered. 7 miles per hour now. Still left to right. Elevation 7,200 feet above sea level. Target elevation approximately 7,550 feet. Uphill shot. 350-foot gain over 1,100 meters. The bullet would fight gravity the entire way. She'd need to hold higher than the ballistic computer suggested. Her father's voice echoed in her head. 15 years old, sitting beside him on a Wyoming ridge. "Computer gives you a starting point, Kira, but wind doesn't blow steady, and gravity doesn't care about your calculations. You gotta feel it." She exhaled slowly. 7 seconds. At the bottom of the breath, the world steadied. Her heartbeat became a metronome. The rifle was an extension of her skeleton, metal and flesh sharing purpose. The Barrett roared. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the figure on the ridge collapsed, falling backward as if jerked by invisible wire. Silence hit the column like a physical force. Lieutenant Commander Thorne Castellano's binoculars stayed fixed on the ridge. Beside him, the SEAL team had gone motionless, each man processing what he just witnessed. The other 2 figures scattered, disappearing into rocks. But the first remained down, motionless. "Holy shit," Webb breathed. He didn't finish the sentence. Kira cycled the bolt, ejecting the spent brass. It clinked against a rock beside her. She was already scanning for secondary targets, but the ridge was empty now. The remaining scouts had learned the lesson. This valley was covered. Castellano lowered his binoculars slowly. He turned to look at her, and Kira saw the recalibration happening behind his eyes. He was a veteran of 13 deployments, a man who'd operated in every hellhole from Ramadi to Helmand Province. He'd seen world-class shooters. He'd worked with Delta snipers and Marine Scout snipers, and the kind of SEAL legends who didn't exist on paper. "How long you been shooting?" he asked. "Since I was 7, sir. Air Force doesn't exactly specialize in long-range interdiction." "No, sir, they don't." Webb was looking at her differently now. The skepticism hadn't vanished, but it had been joined by something else. Curiosity, maybe, or the beginning of respect? Where'd you train? Castellano asked. Depends how you count it, sir. Wyoming, Fort Benning, a few other places that don't show up on official records. Castellano's jaw tightened. That last part told him what he needed to know. There were training programs that existed in budget line items and bureaucratic gray zones, places where operators went to learn skills that conventional units didn't teach. If she'd been through one of those, someone with stars on their collar had signed off on it. But that was 72 hours ago. 72 hours before the impossible shot, before the heat and the dust and the weight of another person's life in her hands, before she knew if she could actually pull the trigger when it mattered. The story began 3 days earlier in Florida, where the air was thick and wet and the ocean stretched to the horizon like liquid mercury. Hurlburt Field sprawled across the Florida Panhandle, home to Air Force Special Operations Command. On a Tuesday morning in late summer, Staff Sergeant Kiera Dalton was teaching combat controllers how to read wind. The classroom smelled like coffee and the particular funk of men who'd been running obstacle courses since 0500. 23 students sat in rows, taking notes, trying to stay awake in the air conditioning after 4 hours of physical training. Wind, Kiera said, is the invisible enemy. At 500 meters, a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind will push your bullet 8 inches off target. At 1,000 meters, that becomes 32 inches. At 1,500 meters, you're looking at 6 feet of deflection. She clicked to the next slide. Mirage patterns, heat shimmer rising from desert floor. Your ballistic computer gives you a starting point, she continued, but computers can't feel the wind on your face, can't read the mirage, can't account for thermals, for terrain effects, for the way wind accelerates through valleys and slows on ridgelines. A hand went up. Staff Sergeant Williams, one of her better students. How do you learn to feel it? Practice, she said simply. Time behind the rifle. 10,000 hours minimum before you start developing real instinct. The students wrote that down. 10,000 hours. It was a number that separated amateurs from professionals, tourists from practitioners. Kiera had logged 15,000 hours since she was 7 years old. 21 years of trigger time, learned on Wyoming ridges where the wind came off the Rockies like a living thing. Her father had taught her. Garrison Dalton, king of 2 Mile, 2009 champion, the man who'd put a bullet on target at 3,520 yards with wind gusting to 18 miles per hour, a shot that still held the record 16 years later. The man who died at 51, suddenly, while she was 19 years old. Heart attack, genetic cardiac condition. Here one moment, gone the next. She'd enlisted 6 months later, looking for structure in the chaos, looking for purpose in the skills he'd given her. Class dismissed, she said. Range work at 1,400 hours. Don't be late. The students filed out, leaving her alone with the smell of old coffee and the hum of fluorescent lights. She was gathering her materials when the door opened again. Captain Harrison stood in the doorway. He was her squadron commander, a weathered man with pilot wings and the kind of tan that came from decades in the sun. Dalton, my office, 5 minutes. His tone said this wasn't a request. 5 minutes later, she stood at attention in front of his desk. He didn't invite her to sit. You've been tasked, he said without preamble. JSOC operation, Afghanistan. You leave in 48 hours. Kiera kept her expression neutral. Sir? He slid a folder across the desk. It was marked with classification stamps she'd only seen a handful of times. Top secret, special access required. I don't have details, Harrison continued, which should tell you something about the level this is coming from. What I know is this. Navy SEAL team needs precision fire support. Someone flagged you as an asset. For what, sir? Harrison's expression suggested he'd asked the same question and received unsatisfactory answers. Long-range interdiction in mountainous terrain. That's all I'm cleared to know. You'll get full briefing once you're in country. Kiera's mind was already calculating. Afghanistan, SEALs, long range, that meant Taliban country, high-value targets, the kind of operation that didn't make it into news reports. Sir, I'm in the middle of a training cycle. 23 combat controllers depending on... I'm aware, Harrison cut her off. I've already arranged coverage. This came from levels that don't take no for an answer, Sergeant. You're going. He paused, studying her with eyes that had seen 3 wars, and understood the weight of what he was asking. Word of advice, he said, voice softer. SEALs are particular about who they work with, especially when it comes to women in direct combat roles. You're going to face skepticism, maybe worse. I understand, sir. Do you? Because this isn't a classroom. This isn't a range where you can take your time and dial in your scope. This is the real thing. People die when shots miss. With respect, sir, people also die when shots aren't taken. Harrison almost smiled. Almost. Your father would have said the same thing. Yes, sir, he would have. 48 hours, Harrison repeated. Use them wisely. That night, Kira sat in her apartment and called her mother. The phone rang 4 times before Susan Dalton answered. Her mother's voice carried the warmth of Arizona evening, the small house in Tucson where she'd rebuilt her life after Garrison died. Kira, honey, this is a nice surprise. Hi, Mom. How are you? They talked about small things for a few minutes. Susan's garden, the heat, the new neighbors. But her mother had always been able to read her, even over phone lines. Something's wrong, Susan said. I can hear it in your voice. Not wrong, Kira hedged. Just, I have to travel for work, training exercise. I'll be out of contact for a couple weeks. The silence on the other end lasted 3 heartbeats too long. Where? I can't say, Mom. You know that. Is it dangerous? Kira looked at the Barrett case propped against her closet door. 28 pounds of precision-machined metal and polymer, the tool she'd been training with for 3 years. It's just training support, she lied. Nothing dangerous. Another silence. Then her mother's voice, smaller now. Your father used to say the same thing. That hit harder than it should have. Garrison Dalton had been many things. Champion shooter, patient teacher, careful man, but in the end, genetics hadn't cared about any of it. His heart had simply stopped, and no amount of skill or preparation had mattered. I'll be careful, Kira said. I promise. After they hung up, she sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about promises and the kinds of lies you tell the people you love to protect them from truths they can't change. Then she opened the Barrett case and began her inspection. The rifle broke down into 3 main components: barrel assembly, receiver, stock. Each piece had its place in the foam-lined case, a puzzle of metal that she'd assembled and disassembled 1,000 times. She started with the barrel, ran a bore snake through it, checking for carbon buildup. The rifling was still sharp, lands and grooves catching the light, good for another 800 rounds before accuracy would start to degrade. The bolt came out next. She inspected the face, the lugs, the firing pin. Everything was clean, properly lubricated, functioning as designed. The scope was a Nightforce ATA-CR, 7-35 power, with a Tremor 3 reticle that provided ranging and holdover information without requiring adjustment. She checked the mounting screws, verified 0, ensured the parallax was properly set. This weapon system had cost over $12,000. It fired .50 BMG rounds that traveled at 2,800 feet per second and retained lethal energy past 2 miles. In the right hands, it could reach out and touch someone at distances where they'd never hear the shot that killed them. Kira had fired 4,247 rounds through this particular rifle. She knew its tendencies, its quirks, knew it liked to shoot half an inch high at 100 yards, knew the trigger broke at exactly 3 pounds 7 ounces, knew the recoil pattern, the way it wanted to push up and to the right if you didn't control it properly. She reassembled it with practiced efficiency, then sat back looking at the completed weapon. Tomorrow she'd be on a plane to Afghanistan. In 72 hours, she might be looking at another human being through this scope, making calculations about wind and distance in elevation, deciding whether someone lived or died based on trigonometry and instinct. Her father had never faced that choice. His shooting had been sport, competition, the pursuit of precision for its own sake. The targets were paper and steel, not people. She wondered what he would say if he were still alive, whether he'd be proud or horrified, whether he'd understand that all those hours on Wyoming ridges had been preparing her for something he'd never imagined. The Garmin on her wrist buzzed. Reminder, 2,230 hours. Begin sleep protocol. She'd programmed it herself. 8 hours before wheels up, she needed to be in bed. 7.5 hours minimum sleep. Wake at 05:30. Light breakfast. Review gear. Physical preparation for the 20-hour journey ahead. Discipline. Structure. The framework her father had taught her, now applied to war instead of competition. She secured the Barrett, locked the case, and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easy. Her mind kept replaying scenarios. The shot, the miss, the consequences of both. Somewhere in the dark hours before dawn, she finally drifted off and dreamed of Wyoming wind. The C-17 Globemaster touched down at Bagram Airfield at 0340 local time. Kira stepped off the ramp into heat that hit like a physical blow, even in the pre-dawn darkness. Afghanistan smelled like dust and diesel and something else, something ancient and hostile that lived in the mountains and didn't care about American air power or precision weapons or any of the technology that was supposed to make war clean and distant. A specialist met her on the tarmac, checked her orders, loaded her gear into a pickup truck that had seen better days. They drove through the sprawling base in silence, past rows of concrete barriers and razor wire, and the kinds of hardened structures that spoke to decades of conflict. The briefing room was in a building without markings. Inside, 6 men waited. They looked at her the way men always did in this environment, assessing, calculating, trying to reconcile her presence with their expectations. Lieutenant Commander Thorne Castellano stood as she entered. He was 42, according to the briefings she'd read on the flight. 13 deployments, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor. The kind of man who'd spent more of his adult life at war than at peace. Staff Sergeant Dalton, he said, welcome to Bagram. Sir, his handshake was firm, professional. The handshake of a man who'd learned to read people quickly and adjust his approach accordingly. These are my men, Castellano continued, gesturing to the others. Senior Chief Brennan Pierce, Petty Officer First Class Rowan Webb, Lieutenant Jax Martinez, and this is Sergeant Major Everett Blackwood, retired SEAL, now civilian advisor to Special Operations Units. Kira's eyes went to Blackwood last. He was older than the others, maybe 67, with weathered skin and eyes that had seen things that never made it into after-action reports. He was studying her with particular interest. We were expecting additional personnel, Pierce said. His Louisiana accent turned the words into something close to a question. Some kind of ISR package, maybe a JTAC. Change of plans, Castellano said smoothly. We got a shooter instead. The room's temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. With all due respect, sir, Webb said carefully, Air Force doesn't exactly specialize in long-range interdiction. Staff Sergeant Dalton does, Castellano replied. His tone suggested the conversation was over, but Blackwood spoke up, voice carrying weight that had nothing to do with rank. Before anyone makes judgments, he said, I suggest we let her demonstrate capability. I've seen footage of her father. Garrison Dalton, 2009 King of 2 Mile. If she's half as good, we're fortunate to have her. The room went quiet. Even Webb looked surprised. You knew my father? Kira asked. Blackwood's expression softened slightly. Knew of him. Watched him shoot at Fort Benning in 2008. Your last name isn't exactly common in precision shooting circles. He paused, then added, "We'll talk later. For now, the commander has a briefing." Castellano moved to a map table where satellite imagery showed mountainous terrain. "We've got a time-sensitive target," he began. "High-value individual, Taliban logistics commander. Intelligence says he'll be at this compound for a meeting, 0600 to 0800 window, tomorrow morning." He traced routes on the map with a laser pointer. "Compound is 8 kilometers northwest of here. Only good approach is from the east, but that's 300 meters of exposed ground. We're not walking up to the front door." "Where's the overwatch?" Martinez asked. Castellano indicated a ridgeline south of the compound. "Here, 780 meters. Clear sight lines to the compound entrance and the entire eastern approach." "And who's running Overwatch?" Pierce asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Dalton will," Castellano said. "Webb will spot for her." The room's silence returned, heavier this time. "Sir," Pierce said carefully, "we usually run Overwatch in pairs minimum. 2 shooters, 2 spotters. Redundancy. Usually we have more than 72 hours to plan an operation," Castellano countered. "We work with what we've got. Dalton, you comfortable with a 780-meter shot in mountain conditions?" "Yes, sir. Even if the entire assault element is depending on your covering fire?" "Especially then, sir." Something in her tone must have convinced him, because Castellano nodded. "Good. We move at 0400. Get some rest. It's going to be a long day." The SEALs filed out, leaving Kira alone with her gear. She was starting toward the door when Blackwood's voice stopped her. "Staff Sergeant, a moment." She turned. The older man had waited until they were alone. "Your father saved my life," he said without preamble. "Fort Benning, 2008. Training accident during a live-fire exercise. I was civilian contractor, got caught in a situation I shouldn't have survived. Garrison Dalton was the civilian shooting instructor. He kept me breathing when I thought I was dying." Kira felt something shift in her chest. "I didn't know. No reason you would. It wasn't official. Wasn't in any reports. But I never forgot. When I saw your name on the roster, when I realized who you were," Blackwood paused, "I knew why you were here." "Sir? You're here because you inherited more than his shooting skill. You inherited his calm. That's what saved me. Not just his marksmanship, but his absolute composure when everything was chaos. He told me something that day. Panic is a luxury. Precision is survival." The words hung in the air between them, and Kira understood that this conversation was about more than her father. It was about tomorrow, about what would be asked of her. "Can you do this?" Blackwood asked. "Not the shooting, I know you can shoot, but can you look through that scope, see another human being, and pull the trigger knowing you're ending a life?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I won't know until I do it." That's an honest answer. Blackwood studied her for a long moment. Your father would be proud of that honesty. Most people lie to themselves about what they're capable of until the moment demands truth. He turned to go, then stopped at the door. "One more thing. Webb and Pierce are good men, good operators, but they're skeptical. You're going to have to prove yourself. Not with words, with performance. I understand. Do you? Because they're not going to give you multiple chances. One mistake and you'll be labeled as a liability. That's not fair, but it's the reality of this world." "Then I won't make mistakes," Kira said. Blackwood almost smiled. "Just like your father. He never made mistakes either, until the day his heart stopped." The words hit like a slap, but Kira understood their intention. Blackwood wasn't being cruel. He was reminding her that perfection was impossible, that even the best operators failed, that overconfidence killed as surely as incompetence. "I'll remember that, sir." "See that you do." After he left, Kira found a corner in the transient barracks and tried to sleep. But her mind kept running scenarios. The shot, the wind, the pressure, the weight of lives depending on her steadiness. At 0345, her internal clock woke her before the alarm. She sat up slowly, letting her body inventory itself, shoulders tight but functional. Hydration adequate, heart rate resting at 54. She drank water anyway, forcing down 20 ounces from her Camelback. Then she began her pre-mission ritual. Gear check, plate carrier adjusted, ammunition pouches loaded, medical kit secured, the Barrett case waiting like a promise and a threat. By 0355, she was ready. The SEALs emerged from darkness like ghosts, each man going through his own pre-mission ritual. Webb approached with 2 granola bars. "Breakfast," he said, handing her one. "Thanks." They ate in silence. Then Webb spoke again, voice low. "That shot yesterday. Wind call was off." Kira looked at him. "I called 7 miles per hour left to right," he continued. "But you held for 8, maybe 9. Why?" "Wind was accelerating. I could feel it." "Feel it?" Webb's skepticism was evident. "My instructor at sniper school said feelings get you killed. Data keeps you alive." "Data's a starting point," Kira replied. "But wind doesn't care about sensors." "Your dad teach you that?" She nodded. "He military?" "No, rancher, but he could shoot." That was understating it dramatically. Her father had been a legend in competitive long-range shooting, multiple national championships, range records that stood for years. He'd taught her to shoot before she could properly hold a rifle, making her understand wind and elevation and the 1,000 tiny variables that separated good shooters from great ones. He died when she was 19. Heart attack, sudden and complete. She joined the Air Force 6 months later, looking for purpose in the structure he'd taught her to value. "All right," Castellano's voice cut through the darkness. "Time to move." They exited the compound in 2 elements. The main assault team, Castellano, Pierce, Martinez, and 3 other SEALs, would move through a wadi system to the compound. Kira and Webb would break off, climbing to the overwatch position on the southern ridge. The night was cold now, temperature in the low 50s. Stars burned overhead, impossibly bright in the clear air. Through her night vision, the landscape became a green maze of rocks and shadows. They moved slowly, carefully. This was enemy territory, Taliban country. Every step carried risk. After 40 minutes, Webb tapped her shoulder and pointed left, their split-off point. Kira followed him away from the main element, climbing northwest toward the ridge. The terrain was steep. Loose scree shifted under her boots. She used her hands for balance, the rifle case strapped across her back, 68 pounds of gear testing every muscle. Webb moved like he'd been born in mountains, confident and quick. She matched his pace, refusing to be the one who slowed them down. Her calves burned, her shoulders ached. But she'd trained for this. 10-mile rucks with 80 pounds, hill sprints until her legs felt like rubber. All of it preparation for moments exactly like this. They reached the ridge as false dawn began graying the eastern sky. Webb immediately began scanning with his spotting scope, checking angles and sightlines. Kira set down the rifle case and began assembling the Barrett. Her hands moved through the sequence automatically. Barrel assembly locked to receiver, stock attached and secured, scope mounted and zeroed. The rifle weighed 28 pounds unloaded. She loaded 5 rounds into the magazine. Chambered one. Set the safety. "Good position," Webb said quietly. "Clear view of the entire compound. Range is 780 meters to main entrance. Wind's calm right now, but that'll change when the sun comes up." Through the scope, the compound resolved into sharp detail. 2 buildings inside walls, courtyard in the center, main gate facing south. No visible guards yet, but dawn was still 20 minutes away. "Overwatch set," Webb radioed. "We have eyes on target." "Copy," Castellano's voice came back. "We're 15 minutes from position. Stand by." The sky continued brightening, gold and orange washing across brown earth. Beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Kira watched the compound, learning its rhythms. A door opened in the eastern building. Man in his 40s, wearing local clothes. He stood in the courtyard for 2 minutes, then went back inside. Possible sentry, Webb noted. Or early riser, Kira said. No weapon. Doesn't mean he's not a threat. True enough. In this war, the distinction between combatant and civilian was often invisible until the moment someone picked up a rifle. The sun broke over the eastern peaks, and suddenly the valley was alive with light. The wind began building, 3 miles per hour, then 4, then 5. At 780 meters, a 5-mile-per-hour wind could push the bullet 6 inches off target. 6 inches meant the difference between a hit and a miss, between mission success and catastrophic failure. Wind's picking up, Webb said, checking his handheld meter. 5 miles per hour now, but it'll build. This valley funnels it. Kira felt it against her face. Gentle, but present. She adjusted her position slightly, ensuring her natural point of aim aligned with the main compound entrance. This was the part no one talked about. The waiting. Movies showed action and explosions, but real operations were 90% patience. Lying in dirt, watching through a scope while your body screamed to move. But Kira had learned to embrace the stillness, to become part of the landscape. Her father had taught her that too. The discipline of patience, the art of becoming invisible until the moment demanded action. Excellence is practice, not destination, he used to say, because the destination keeps moving. At 0547, a vehicle approached from the north. Toyota pickup, common as dirt in Afghanistan. It stopped outside the compound gate. 3 men got out. The middle one wore a tan pakol. That's him, Kira said softly. Confirm, Webb radioed. HVT, Blackbeard, tan pakol. Entering compound now. Copy, Castellano replied. Stand by. The 3 men entered through the main gate. Kira tracked them through her scope as they crossed the courtyard and entered the western building. The door closed behind them. 5 minutes passed. Then Castellano's voice. Assault element moving in. 3 minutes. Kira's breathing steadied. 4 seconds in. 7 seconds out. Her heart rate had already dropped into the low 60s. The rifle was an extension of her skeleton now, flesh and metal sharing purpose. Through the scope, she watched the compound. The men in the courtyard were still talking, unaware that 6 SEALs were creeping through a wadi toward their wall. At 0558, the explosion came. The eastern wall blew inward, breaching charge tearing a hole through mud brick. The SEALs poured through, weapons up, moving with violent precision. The men in the courtyard scattered. One reached for a weapon leaning against the wall. Armed hostile. Courtyard, Webb called. Right side. Kira's scope tracked him automatically. The man was raising an AK-47, swinging it toward the breach point. This was the moment. Not training, not simulation. A human being in her crosshairs. And if she didn't pull the trigger, American lives would be lost. Her finger moved to the trigger. 3 pounds, 7 ounces of pressure. Time seemed to slow. She could see the man's face now, even at 780 meters. See the concentration, the intent. She thought of her father, of Blackwood's words, of the 21 years that had led to this single instant. The Barrett roared. 780 meters away, the man dropped. Target down, Webb said, voice carrying something close to awe. But Kira was already cycling the bolt, scanning for new threats. The courtyard was chaos now. SEALs moving through, hostiles emerging from both buildings. She saw Pierce put down 1 man with 3 rounds, saw Martinez move toward the western building, 2 other SEALs flanking him. Then movement on the roof of the eastern building caught her peripheral vision. A man appeared, RPG on his shoulder. He was turning, bringing the launcher to bear on the assault team below. Webb hadn't seen him yet, was still focused on the courtyard. Kira had maybe 2 seconds to make the shot. An upward angle, moving target. Wind that had built to 7 miles per hour. No time for confirmation. No time for protocol. She fired. The man fell backward. The RPG tumbled off the roof, unfired. What the hell? Webb spun toward her. I didn't call that shot. But the radio was already exploding with voices. Who fired? Who authorized that? Then Castellano's voice cut through, hard and certain. Whoever it was just saved Martinez's ass. Stand down. The firefight lasted 90 seconds total. Then Castellano's voice again. Compound secure. HVT in custody. Overwatch, hold position. Kira stayed behind the rifle, scanning. The compound was still now except for the SEALs moving through final clearing procedures. 2 hostile bodies in the courtyard, one on the roof, others inside, handled by the assault element. We're good, Webb said beside her. But he was looking at her with something approaching awe now. 2 shots, 2 kills, both at 780 meters in active combat conditions. And she'd broken protocol to make the second one. She'd fired without spotter confirmation, made an autonomous decision in direct violation of how SEAL teams operated. The shot had saved a life, but it had also created a problem. Because now Castellano had to decide, was she an asset who could be trusted, or a liability who put mission over procedure? That question would define everything that came next. 15 minutes later, the assault team emerged with 5 prisoners, hands zip-tied behind their backs. The HVT walked in the center, head down, tan pacol, dusty from being forced to the ground during the takedown. They moved quickly, loading into vehicles that had been pre-positioned 2 kilometers east. Overwatch, collapse to extraction point Alpha, Castellano ordered. Kira broke down the Barrett, hands moving through the disassembly sequence with mechanical precision. Barrel removed. Receiver separated. Stock detached. Each piece back in its foam cutout. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying the rooftop shot. The decision to fire without confirmation. The weight of that choice. Webb hadn't spoken since the firefight ended. He moved efficiently, packing his spotting scope and range-finding equipment, but she could feel his reassessment happening in the silence between them. They moved down from the ridge, covering ground quickly now that stealth wasn't required. The extraction point was 2 kilometers southeast, a flat area where helicopters could land without taking fire from surrounding ridges. The team arrived within minutes of each other. Kira and Webb were last, emerging from a draw to find the SEALs in defensive perimeter, prisoners secured in the center. Castellano approached as she set down her gear. His expression was unreadable. Nice shooting, he said. Thank you, sir. That rooftop target. He paused, studying her. They said you fired before Webb called it. I saw the RPG, sir. Most shooters need confirmation before engaging. Most shooters aren't responsible for keeping your team alive, sir. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, not quite insubordinate, but close enough that Pierce, standing nearby, raised an eyebrow. Castellano studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Fair point. The helicopter appeared 10 minutes later. 2 MH-47 Chinooks, flying low and fast. They landed in clouds of dust, ramps dropping immediately. The team loaded quickly. Prisoners first, then gear, then personnel. Kira was last on, finding a seat along the webbing. The engines roared and the helicopter lifted, banking hard south toward Bagram. Through the open ramp, she watched Afghanistan fall away. Brown mountains, green valleys, endless hostile terrain. She'd been here 4 days. It felt like 4 years. Webb sat beside her, had to shout over the engine noise. So what's your actual job? You're not regular Air Force. She considered how to answer. I train combat controllers. That's not what you were doing back there. Number. So what were you doing? Sir asked for a sniper. I was available. Webb laughed, sharp and disbelieving. Available? That's what we're calling it. Across from them, Pierce was watching the exchange. He leaned forward. How many deployments you got, Dalton? This is my first, Senior Chief. Pierce looked at Webb, then back at her. First combat? Yes, Senior Chief. Then where'd you learn to shoot like that? My father taught me the basics. The Air Force taught me everything else. Air Force doesn't have snipers. Not officially, Kira said. That hung in the air for a moment. Then Castellano's voice cut through from the front of the helicopter. Pierce, stow it. She did the job. That's what matters. But as the Chinook hammered through Afghan sky, Kira could feel the team's attention on her differently now. The skepticism from before had shifted into something more complex. Curiosity mixed with respect, mixed with uncertainty. She closed her eyes, letting the engine vibration wash through her body. In 6 hours, they'd be back at Bagram. She'd debrief, file reports, probably get on another C-17 back to Florida. But right now, she was exactly where she'd trained to be. Bagram Airfield sprawled across the Afghan desert like a small city. The Chinooks touched down on the military side, away from the main terminal where cargo flights and contractors operated. Kira stepped off the ramp into afternoon heat. 108 degrees, according to the thermometer outside the operations building. She'd been cold in the mountains 6 hours ago. Now sweat soaked through her uniform before she'd walked 50 meters. The prisoners were processed immediately, disappearing into the hands of intelligence personnel who operated in unmarked buildings with no signs. The HVT would be interrogated, cross-referenced, added to databases that tracked the web of Taliban command structure. Castellano's team gathered in a briefing room that smelled like stale coffee and air conditioning struggling against impossible odds. Maps on walls, tactical imagery, the detritus of endless operations. Good work today, Castellano said, addressing the team. Clean operation, no friendly casualties, HVT in custody. That's how it's supposed to go. The SEALs nodded, but Kira could see the exhaustion settling over them. These men had been running operations for months, the kind of sustained tempo that ground people down regardless of how tough they were. Debrief in 30 minutes, Castellano continued. Then you've got 72 hours downtime. Use it. The team dispersed. Kira started toward the door, but Castellano caught her attention. Dalton, hold back. She waited as the room emptied. When they were alone, Castellano pulled 2 bottles of water from a mini-fridge and handed her one. She drank half immediately. I made some calls while we were flying back, he said. Tried to get information about who you actually are. Kira said nothing. Your CO at Hurlburt says you're an instructor. Exemplary record. Nothing unusual. But when I pushed higher, started asking about your training pipeline, suddenly everyone got vague. I'm not sure what you want me to say, sir. I want you to tell me why an Air Force staff sergeant who supposedly trains combat controllers can outshoot most SEAL snipers I've worked with. Some people have aptitude, sir. I'm good at shooting. The Air Force recognized that and gave me opportunities to develop the skill. Opportunities. Castellano sat on the edge of a table. That's diplomatic. It's accurate, sir. He studied her. 42 years old and 2 decades in special operations, showing in every line of his face. Multiple deployments to every hotspot the U.S. military touched. He'd seen things that never made it into after-action reports. You know what I think? He said. I think someone way above my pay grade decided they needed shooters who could operate in austere environments, integrate with special operations units, provide precision fire support. But they couldn't do it officially because of turf wars and bureaucracy and all the other bullshit that happens when you try to create something new in the military. He paused. So they found people with talent, people who could keep quiet, and they trained them in programs that don't officially exist. Kira kept her expression neutral. Am I close, sir? I wouldn't know, sir. Castellano laughed, short and sharp. Okay, keep your secrets, but understand something. What you did today saved lives. Martinez was exposed when that RPG operator showed up. You dropped him before I even saw the threat. That's the kind of shooting that makes a difference. I was doing my job, sir. Your job. He stood, moving toward the door. Right. There's a C-17 leaving for Ramstein day after tomorrow. You're scheduled on it. But if you wanted to stay, if you wanted to work with this team for the rest of our rotation, I could make that happen. We could use someone with your skill set." The offer hung in the air. Kira felt the pull of it, the chance to do real work, to be part of a team that operated at the highest level. But she also knew what it would cost. More deployments, more time in hostile territory, more shots that ended lives from distances where you never saw the target's face. "I appreciate the offer, sir, but I have responsibilities back at Hurlburt." Castellano nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but if you ever decide you want to do this full-time, you let me know. I'll make it happen." "Yes, sir." He opened the door, then paused. "One more thing. Webb said you told him your father taught you to shoot. What was his name?" "Garrison Dalton, sir." Castellano's eyebrows rose. "The Garrison Dalton? King of 2 Mile, 2009? "Yes, sir. I saw footage of that. He hit a target at 3,520 yards. Wind was impossible that day. 12 miles per hour, gusting to 18. He held for 19 and trusted it," Kiera said. Castellano's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry. When?" 9 years ago, 2016. I was 19. You've been carrying that forward, his legacy." She hadn't thought of it that way exactly, but the description fit. "I suppose so, sir. Well, he'd be proud. What you did today, that was world-class shooting." After Castellano left, Kiera sat alone in the briefing room, letting herself feel the exhaustion. Her body ached in a dozen places. Her mind was still processing the morning's events with clinical detachment. 2 men dead by her hand. She tried to feel something about that. Guilt, regret, satisfaction, but there was only the same calm certainty she'd felt when pulling the trigger. They were threats. She eliminated them. Geometry and ballistics rendered into consequence. Was that normal? She didn't know. The shooting instructors never talked about the psychological weight. They taught windage and elevation and breathing control. They didn't prepare you for the moment when you realized killing was just another technical problem to solve. Her phone buzzed, a text from her roommate back at Hurlburt Field. "Hope deployment is going well. We miss you at morning Pacific time." Kiera smiled slightly. Morning PT. The controlled chaos of combat controller candidates running obstacle courses, complaining about the heat, bonding over shared suffering. It felt like another world, impossibly distant from Afghan ridges and compounds full of armed hostiles. She texted back, "Home soon. Save me a spot in the morning run." The debrief lasted 2 hours. Intelligence officers asked detailed questions about the compound layout, prisoner behavior, anything that might feed into larger pattern analysis. They were particularly interested in the rooftop shooter. "You engaged before the assault element called for fire support," an intelligence captain said. Her name tape read Morrison, no relation to the SEAL. "What made you decide to engage proactively?" "He had an RPG and was preparing to fire on friendly forces," Kiera said. "Waiting for confirmation would have cost time we didn't have." "What was your confidence level on the shot?" "High. Range was established. Wind was steady. Target was stationary for approximately 1.8 seconds. Most snipers require longer to make that shot. I'm not most snipers." The words landed differently than she'd intended, came across as arrogant when she meant it as simple fact. The captain's expression tightened. But Castellano, sitting to one side, intervened. Staff Sergeant Dalton demonstrated exceptional judgment under pressure. Her engagement likely prevented casualties to the assault element. I'm recommending her for commendation. The intelligence officers made notes, asked a few more questions, then dismissed everyone. As Kiera left the building, Webb caught up with her. "Hey, some of us are getting food at the DFAC. You hungry?" She was, actually. Hadn't eaten since the granola bar before dawn. "Sure." The dining facility was crowded. Soldiers, contractors, support personnel, all grabbing meals between shifts. Kiera followed Webb through the line, loading her tray with protein and vegetables. They found seats at a table where Pierce and two other SEALs were already eating. "The sniper graces us with her presence," Pierce said, but there was humor in it now, not the edge from before. Kira sat, began eating methodically. Her body needed fuel. Calories were currency. "So what's it like?" one of the other SEALs asked. Petty Officer, 2nd Class, James Park. "Being the only woman in a SEAL operation?" "I wouldn't know," Kira said. "I'm not a SEAL. I just provided overwatch." "Come on, you know what I mean." She did, but the question annoyed her anyway. Not because Park was being malicious, but because it reduced her to a demographic rather than a capability. "It's like being any other operator," she said carefully. "You do your job, you support the team, you don't become a liability. But you must get pushback. Guys who don't think women should be in combat roles. Sometimes, less than you'd think." That was mostly true. The military was changing, slowly. Women had been in combat roles officially since 2013, though in practice they'd been in combat much longer, just in roles that weren't formally recognized. Kira had learned early that the best response to skepticism was competence. Let the work speak. "That shot this morning," Pierce said, changing the subject. "The rooftop target. How'd you calculate that so fast?" "I didn't, not consciously. It's pattern recognition at that point. You see the angle, the distance, the wind, and your brain does the math without thinking about it." "Your brain does the math," Webb repeated. "Most people's brains just panic. Most people haven't spent 21 years shooting." Park whistled. 21 years? You're what, 28? "Started when I was 7. Your dad really was a champion shooter?" "Yes." "And he just taught you? Like casually?" Kiera smiled slightly. "Nothing casual about it. He treated training like a job. We'd be at the range 6 days a week, sometimes 8 hours a day in summer." "That's not a childhood," Park said. "That's a professional athletic program." It was both. He made sure I had normal stuff too. School, friends, sports. But shooting was the core. He believed if you were going to do something, you did it completely or not at all. She could still see him clearly. Tall and weathered, permanent squint from decades in the sun. He'd been patient and demanding in equal measure, never accepting less than her best, but never pushing beyond what she could give. "What happened to him?" Pierce asked. "Heart attack. He was 51. Doctors said it was genetic, nothing he could have prevented." "That's rough. I'm sorry." "Thank you." She paused. "But he gave me something permanent. The skill." "Yeah," Webb said, "but also the discipline. The understanding that mastery is earned through repetition, not reached through talent alone." Kira looked at him, surprised he'd articulated it so clearly. "That's what I see when you shoot," Webb continued. "It's not just technical skill, it's a mindset." The conversation drifted to other topics. Football scores from home, rumors about troop rotations, the endless military gossip that filled downtime. Kira listened more than she talked, learning the team's dynamics. These men had deployed together for 6 months. They knew each other's rhythms, habits, strengths, and weaknesses. She was an outsider, temporarily useful, but not part of the core unit. That was fine. She'd learned long ago that belonging wasn't required. Respect was enough. After dinner, she returned to her assigned quarters. A small room in the transient barracks, Spartan and functional. Metal cot, wall locker, shared bathroom down the hall. She'd stayed in worse. She cleaned her weapon first, breaking down the Barrett completely. Carbon buildup on the bolt face, dust in the trigger assembly. She cleaned each component methodically, using the kit she'd carried through every deployment and training exercise. The rifle was a tool, but it was also a connection. Her father had taught her on a different rifle, a custom-built .338 Lapua that he'd eventually given her when she joined the military. She still had that rifle, locked in a safe at her apartment in Florida, too valuable and too sentimental to risk in combat. But the Barrett had its own relationship now. She'd fired thousands of rounds through this particular weapon, learning its quirks and tendencies. The trigger broke at exactly 3 pounds, 7 ounces. The barrel was good for another 800 rounds before accuracy degraded. She knew it like a surgeon knows their instruments. Her phone rang. Video call from an unknown number with a 703 area code. Virginia. She answered cautiously. A man appeared on screen. Late 50s, civilian clothes, but military bearing. Staff Sergeant Dalton? Speaking. Colonel Michael Torres, Air Force Special Operations Command. Do you have a secure moment? Kira glanced around the empty room. Yes, sir. I've been briefed on your operation this morning. Commander Castellano had very positive things to say. Thank you, sir. He also said he offered you an extended assignment with his team. Yes, sir. I declined. Why? Kira chose her words carefully. I have training responsibilities at Hurlburt. Combat controllers depend on that instruction. The combat controllers can find other instructors, Torres said. What you did today, that's a rare capability. With respect, sir, I prefer training to active operations. Torres's expression suggested he didn't quite believe that, but he didn't push. Understood. However, I want you to know that opportunities exist if your preferences change. What you represent, the ability to integrate with special operations units and provide precision fire support, that's increasingly valuable. I'll keep that in mind, sir. There's also the matter of recognition. Castellano is recommending you for the Bronze Star with Valor. The citation will note your actions prevented casualties to friendly forces during a direct action operation. Kira felt something twist in her chest. Not pride exactly, but a complicated mix of emotions she couldn't parse. Thank you, sir. You earned it. Not many people can make those shots under pressure. Torres paused. Your father would be proud. You knew him, sir? Knew of him. I followed competitive shooting in the early 2000s. Garrison Dalton was a legend. His wind-reading ability was unmatched. He used to say, "Wind was alive," Kira said. You couldn't predict it, only listen to it. Seems like you learned to listen. After the call ended, Kira sat on the cot, staring at the blank wall. Bronze Star. That would go in her service record, become part of her official history. People would ask about it, want to know the story. She wasn't sure she wanted to tell that story. Wasn't sure she wanted to be defined by 2 kills on an Afghan ridgeline, even if they were technically impressive. But that was the paradox of military service. You train for skills you hoped you'd never use. Then when you used them successfully, you were celebrated. The better you were at ending lives, the more decorated you became. Her father had never faced that. His shooting was competition, sport, the pursuit of precision for its own sake. The targets were paper and steel, not people. He'd never had to reconcile being a good shooter with being a good person. Kira laid back on the cot, closing her eyes. Sleep would be difficult. It always was after combat. Her mind would replay the shots, analyzing every variable, questioning every decision. But she'd learned to manage that too. Breathe. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds out. Let the thoughts come and go without attachment. Tomorrow she'd do the administrative tasks, paperwork, equipment turn-in, travel arrangements. Then day after tomorrow, she'd board a C-17 and leave Afghanistan behind. But some part of her would stay here, on that ridge behind the Barrett, making shots that mattered. The next morning, Blackwood found her at the ranges. She was running drills, keeping her skills sharp, even though the mission was over. You shoot like your father, he said, watching her work through a sequence at 600 meters. Same economy of motion, same absolute certainty. Thank you, sir. That wasn't a compliment, not entirely. He moved closer, hands in pockets. Your father had a gift, but it was also a curse. He was so good, so naturally talented, that he sometimes forgot other people couldn't do what he did. Kira lowered her rifle, turned to face him. Garrison saved my life in 2008, Blackwood continued. But what I didn't tell you was the whole story. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, heavier. I didn't just recommend you to Torres last month. I've been building this for years, since 2017, when you enlisted. I made sure your training pipeline included the right schools, the right instructors. I flagged your file for JSOC awareness. I orchestrated this entire deployment. He met her eyes directly. Your father saved my life. I couldn't repay him, but I could ensure his daughter had every opportunity to use the gifts he gave her, even if that meant manipulating your career from the shadows. The words hit like a physical blow. You've been controlling my path for 8 years? I've been opening doors, Blackwood corrected. You walked through them on your own merit. But yes, I made sure those doors existed. Kira felt something between anger and gratitude warring in her chest. That's manipulative, Blackwood offered. Yes, but necessary. Your father told me something that day in 2008, right before he pulled me out of that kill zone. He said, I'm teaching Kira to survive without me, to be stronger than I was, to use what I gave her for something that matters. Even then, he knew about his heart condition, knew he was on borrowed time. He asked me if anything happened to him, to watch over you, to make sure you got opportunities he couldn't provide. So you've been playing puppet master, Kira said. I've been paying a debt. Blackwood's expression was unreadable. Your father asked me to do one thing, make sure his daughter's talent didn't go to waste. I've spent 8 years doing that. Yesterday proved I made the right choice. He paused. But I also told you something else yesterday, about talent without discipline being luck waiting to run out. That applies here too. You broke protocol, fired without confirmation. What if you'd been wrong? What if that man on the roof wasn't a threat? Then I would have made a terrible mistake, sir. Exactly. And that's what separates operators who have long careers from ones who flame out. Not talent, discipline. The willingness to follow protocols, even when your gut says otherwise. Kira bristled slightly. With respect, sir, following protocol would have gotten Martinez killed. Maybe, or maybe Webb would have seen the threat 2 seconds later, and you could have made a coordinated engagement. You'll never know because you decided to act alone. The criticism stung because it was valid. She had broken protocol, had made an autonomous decision in a team environment. The fact that it worked didn't erase the risk. What should I have done differently? She asked. I don't know, Blackwood admitted. That's the hell of it. In the moment, you made the best call you could with the information you had. But you need to understand that trust is currency in this community, and you spent some of that currency yesterday. How do I earn it back? You already started, by accepting the criticism instead of defending the decision. Your father struggled with that. He was so certain of his abilities that he had trouble seeing his blind spots. Blackwood turned to leave, then stopped. Torres is going to offer you something, a program that doesn't officially exist yet. Think carefully before you answer, because once you're in, there's no going back to being just an instructor. After Blackwood left, Kira stood at the firing line, looking downrange at targets that would never shoot back. She thought about her father, about the last conversation they'd had before he died. She'd been home from college for summer break. They'd gone to the range together like always. He'd seemed tired that day, moving slower than usual. She'd asked if he was okay, and he'd said, yes, just getting old. 3 days later, his heart stopped. Genetic cardiac condition that no one knew about until it was too late. He was 51 years old, at the peak of his abilities, and then he was gone. She joined the Air Force 6 months later, looking for structure in the chaos, looking for purpose in the skills he'd given her. Now someone was offering her a chance to use those skills in ways her father never imagined. To carry his legacy forward, not through competition, but through service. But it would cost something. More deployments, more time away from teaching, more moments like yesterday morning when she'd looked through a scope and made a decision that ended a life. Could she do that? Not once, but repeatedly. Could she become someone for whom killing was just another technical problem to solve? She didn't know. But she was beginning to suspect that finding out was exactly what her father had been preparing her for all along. The C-17 Globemaster departed Bagram at 0600, loaded with personnel rotating home. Kira found a seat along the cargo bay wall, strapping in among soldiers and contractors and support staff. Everyone had the same exhausted look, people ready to leave this place behind. The flight would take them to Ramstein Air Base in Germany, then another hop to the States. 36 hours of travel with layovers and processing. Kira settled in for the duration. Across from her, Webb had also managed to get on this flight. His team's rotation was ending. He was heading back to Virginia Beach for training cycles and family time. "You ever been to Virginia?" he asked as the C-17 climbed into Afghan sky. "A few times. Training courses mostly. Different world from Wyoming." "Everything's different from Wyoming," he smiled. "What made you join the Air Force? If you were such a good shooter, you could have gone into competitive shooting professionally, made decent money, traveled the world." "My father did that. I wanted something different, military different. Competition is great, but it's ultimately about you, your score, your ranking, your achievement. I wanted to be part of something larger, and you found that in the Air Force." "I did, training combat controllers, teaching them skills that keep them alive. That matters. That has value beyond personal achievement." Webb nodded slowly. "But you also wanted to use the skill. Really use it." "Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to know if I could. If all those years of training translated to real-world effectiveness." "And now you know." "Now I know." The conversation lapsed into silence. Around them, other passengers slept or read or stared into space. The C-17's engines provided constant white noise, drowning out everything else. Kira closed her eyes, letting exhaustion finally catch up. She dreamed of Wyoming. Wide open spaces, wind moving through grass, her father's voice calling corrections as she fired at distant targets. Simple and clean and safe. She woke as the C-17 descended into Ramstein. Gray German sky, green landscape, the organized chaos of a major military installation. They'd be here for 8 hours before the next flight. In a transient terminal, Kira found coffee and a sandwich, then claimed a quiet corner to check email. Messages from her commander at Hurlburt confirming her return. Notes from combat controller candidates asking questions about upcoming training. The mundane details of normal military life. There was also an email from an address she didn't recognize, marked "Official Use Only." "Staff Sergeant Dalton, your performance during recent operations has been noted at the highest levels. AFSOC is developing new programs focused on precision engagement capabilities across various operational environments. Your skill set aligns with program requirements. If interested in learning more, contact the undersigned at your earliest convenience. Colonel Michael Torres, AFSOC/A3. Kira read it twice, parsing the careful language. New programs meant experimental units, things that didn't fit traditional organizational structures. Precision engagement capabilities meant snipers, though they wouldn't use that word officially. They were building something, a capability that didn't exist yet, assembled from people like her. Specialists who could integrate across service boundaries, provide skills that conventional units lacked. She thought about Torres's video call, about Castellano's offer, about Blackwood's revelation that he'd been orchestrating this for years. The pieces formed a pattern, the outline of something larger. She saved the email, didn't reply. Not yet. That decision required more thought than she could give in a German airport terminal at 0800 local time. The final flight departed Ramstein at 1400, bound for Joint Base McGuire in New Jersey. From there, Kira would catch a military hop to Hurlburt Field. Total travel time, 42 hours door to door. She slept most of the Atlantic crossing, dreamless and heavy. When she woke, the sun was setting over the American East Coast, painting clouds gold and red. Home. Sort of. She'd been in Florida for 3 years, but it didn't feel like home the way Wyoming had. Home was where your people were, and her people were mostly gone now. Father dead, mother remarried and living in Arizona, siblings scattered across the country. The military was her family now, the structure, the purpose, the shared mission. It wasn't the same, but it was enough. Joint Base McGuire was massive, runways stretching forever, aircraft of every type lined up in rows. The C-17 taxied to the military terminal, where passengers disembarked into humid New Jersey evening. Kiera processed through customs, collected her gear, then found the scheduling office for rotator flights. Next, Hurlburt-bound flight tomorrow morning, 0600. She checked into the on-base hotel, a serviceable room that smelled like industrial cleaner, dropped her gear, showered for the first time in 72 hours, then collapsed on the bed. Her phone showed missed calls, 3 from her mother, 2 from her commander. She called her mother first, Kiera. Her mother's voice was warm, worried. "I've been trying to reach you." "Sorry, Mom. I was traveling." "From where?" "Afghanistan. Short deployment, just a few days." "Afghanistan." Her mother's tone flattened. "You told me you were a trainer. You said you weren't in combat." "I'm mostly a trainer. This was a special circumstance." "Special circumstance. That's what your father used to say when he was about to do something dangerous." Kiera closed her eyes. Her mother had never fully supported the military career, had wanted her daughter to pursue safer paths. College, maybe graduate school, something that didn't involve war zones. "I'm fine, Mom. Not a scratch on me. This time." "What about next time?" "There may not be a next time, but there could be. They could send you again, couldn't they?" "Technically, yes." Her mother sighed, a sound carrying years of worry. I already lost your father. I don't want to lose you too." "You won't. I'm careful. I'm good at what I do." So was he. And then one day his heart stopped. That hung between them, the randomness of death, the impossibility of guarantees. Her father had been strong, healthy, careful, and it hadn't mattered. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too. Please be careful." After hanging up, Kiera called her commander, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison, no relation to the SEAL she'd worked with. He answered immediately. "Dalton, welcome back. How was it?" "Successful, sir. 2-day operation. Clean results. I got a call from AFSOC. They're very happy with your performance." "Thank you, sir. They also said you might be getting a Bronze Star." "Possibly, sir." Morrison paused. "That's a significant decoration for an instructor." "It was a significant operation, sir." "I'm sure it was." Another pause. "There's been talk, Dalton, about where your career is heading. Some people think you should be doing more operational work, less instruction. What do you think?" Kiera sat on the edge of the hotel bed, looking at her reflection in the darkened window. Who was she? Instructor or operator? Teacher or warrior? "I'm not sure what I want, sir." "That's honest. Take some time, think it through, but know that whatever you decide, I'll support it. You've earned that." "Thank you, sir. See you tomorrow. Take the rest of the week off when you get back. You've earned that too." The next morning, Kiera caught the 0600 flight to Hurlburt Field. The C-130 was loud, uncomfortable, filled with special operations trainees heading to courses. She recognized a few combat controllers she'd trained months ago, now moving on to advanced programs. One of them, a staff sergeant named Williams, recognized her. "Staff Sergeant Dalton, heard you just got back from deployment." "That's right. How was it?" "Educational." Williams grinned. "You say that about everything. How's the weather?" "Educational." "How's your lunch?" "Educational." Most things are, if you pay attention. See, that's why you're a good instructor. You actually believe that. The flight landed at Hurlburt at 1100 local time. Florida heat hit like a hammer, different from Afghan heat. Wetter, heavier. Kira collected her gear and caught a ride to the training squadron. The building was familiar, comfortable in its mundanity. Offices, classrooms, equipment lockers. This was her world, the place where she spent most of her time. She checked in with the operations desk, confirmed her schedule for next week, then headed to her office. It was small, shared with two other instructors, but it had a window and a door that closed. On her desk was a stack of mail and a handwritten note from Williams. Staff Sergeant Dalton, graduated the pipeline, heading to my first unit next month. Thanks for preparing us. The shooting fundamentals you taught saved my ass during final exercise. Respectfully, Williams. Kira smiled, folding the note carefully. This was why she did it, not for decorations or recognition, but for moments like this. Students who learned, who survived, who passed knowledge forward. But she also thought about the ridge in Afghanistan, the clarity of purpose, the immediate impact, 2 shots that prevented casualties, that protected friendly forces. That mattered in ways that classroom instruction never could. Both had value, but they required different sacrifices, different commitments. Her phone buzzed, text from Webb. Made it home. Team's grateful for your work. If you're ever in Virginia Beach, first beer's on me. She replied, appreciate it, stay safe. Another text came through, this one from Pierce. That rooftop shooter had Martinez dead to rights. You saved his life. We don't forget things like that. Kira stared at the message for a long moment. This was the hidden cost of operational work. The relationships formed under fire. The bonds created when people trusted you with their lives. She typed back, just doing my job, glad I could help. But it was more than a job, and she knew it. It was the moment when everything she'd learned, everything her father had taught her, everything the Air Force had refined, all of it crystallized into action that mattered. 3 weeks later, Kira was back in rhythm. Morning PT with the combat controller candidates. Classroom instruction on ballistics, wind reading, range estimation. Afternoon sessions on the shooting range, working with students one-on-one. It was good work, important work, but she couldn't stop thinking about Afghanistan. One evening, she drove out to a private range 40 miles from base. The owner was a retired Marine sniper who let her use the facility after hours. She set up at the 1,000-meter line, pulling her father's old .338 Lapua from its case. The rifle was a work of art. Custom stock, match-grade barrel, Night Force scope. Her father had built it himself, tuning each component until it shot like a precision instrument. She settled behind it, building her shooting position the way he'd taught her. Rock-solid foundation, natural point of aim, relaxed but controlled. The evening wind was tricky, gusting, swirling, unpredictable. She watched the mirage through the scope, learning its patterns, felt the air against her face. Listened. The target was a 12-inch steel plate, barely visible at this distance. She adjusted for elevation, held for wind, controlled her breathing. At the bottom of the exhale, she fired. 2 seconds later, the distant clang of steel. She cycled the bolt, fired again. Another hit. 5 rounds, 5 hits at 1,000 meters in difficult wind. No spotter, no computer, just her and the rifle and 21 years of practice. This was who she was. Not just an instructor, not just an operator, but someone who understood that precision was a form of respect. Respect for the craft, respect for the difficulty, respect for the lives depending on that skill. Her phone rang. Colonel Torres, the AFSOC officer who'd emailed weeks ago. Staff Sergeant Dalton, do you have a moment? Yes, sir. I wanted to follow up on my previous message. I know you've been back for a few weeks, had time to settle. Have you given any thought to what we discussed? Kira looked through the scope at the distant steel plate, still ringing from her last shot. I have, sir, and I think I'd like to hear more about these new programs. Excellent. I'll send you details for a briefing next month. Bring questions. After the call ended, Kira packed up the rifle carefully, her father's rifle, now hers, to carry forward, the legacy he'd built, the skill he'd passed on, the understanding that excellence mattered. She didn't know exactly where this path led. The military was changing, creating new roles for people with unusual capabilities. She might end up training those operators, or becoming one of them, or something in between that didn't have a name yet. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. When the moment came, when someone needed a shot made at impossible distance in difficult conditions, she would be ready. Because that's what precision meant. Not perfection, but preparation meeting opportunity. The sun was setting over the Florida range, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of Wyoming. Her father's voice echoed in memory. Winds picking up, hold higher, trust it. She'd trusted it then. She trusted it now. Kira drove back toward base, the rifle secure in its case, her mind already planning tomorrow's training session. Combat controllers who needed to learn what she knew. Skills that would keep them alive when the mission went sideways. But in the back of her mind, she could still feel the Barrett's recoil, still see the ridgeline through the scope, still hear Castellano's voice. Nice shooting. She smiled slightly. Nice shooting indeed. The briefing took place 4 weeks later in a nondescript building at Hurlburt Field that didn't appear on any public maps. Kira arrived 15 minutes early, wearing service dress uniform, bronze star ribbon freshly sewn above her left pocket. The medal had arrived with minimal ceremony. Her commander had presented it in his office, shook her hand, told her it was well-deserved. She'd thanked him, filed the paperwork, and tried not to think about what it represented. Colonel Torres met her in the lobby. He was tall, lean, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades in special operations. His handshake was firm, his eyes assessing. Staff Sergeant Dalton, thank you for coming. Sir. He led her down a corridor to a secure briefing room. Inside, 3 other people waited. 2 lieutenant colonels and a woman in her 50s wearing a DoD contractor badge. This is Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Vance, Lieutenant Colonel Garrett Webb, and Dr. Margaret Hollis from DARPA, Torres said, gesturing to each. Kira took the indicated seat. The room had no windows, just maps on the walls showing global hotspots, and a large screen displaying the Air Force Special Operations Command seal. Torres began. What you participated in last month, that operation in Afghanistan, was a proof of concept. We've been developing a capability we're calling Precision Integration Specialists. He clicked a remote and the screen changed to show organizational charts. The concept is simple. Highly skilled shooters who can embed with special operations units across service branches, providing precision fire support in environments where traditional sniper teams can't operate effectively. The challenge is bureaucratic, Vance said, taking over. Each service branch has its own sniper programs, its own training pipelines, its own doctrine. But modern operations require flexibility. A SEAL team operating in hostile territory might need precision fire support, but they can't always bring their own sniper element. Asset allocation, transportation constraints, operational security, lots of factors limit what's possible. That's where you come in, Lieutenant Colonel Webb continued. We've identified approximately 24 personnel across all branches who have the shooting skills, the temperament, and the adaptability to fill this role. You're one of them. Your background growing up in competitive shooting, extensive training, ability to integrate quickly with an unfamiliar team makes you ideal. What exactly would this role entail? Kira asked. Dr. Hollis spoke for the first time, her voice carrying academic precision. You'd remain in your current position as an instructor, but you'd be on call for specific operations. When a mission requires precision engagement capabilities and traditional assets aren't available, you'd be deployed. Could be SEAL teams, could be Army Special Forces, Could be CIA paramilitary. You'd integrate, execute the mission, return to your regular duties. How often? Kira asked. Hard to say, Torres admitted. Could be once a year, could be 6 times. Depends on operational tempo and mission requirements. Webb leaned forward. There's also a training component. We want you to develop curriculum for other potential precision integration specialists. Document your methodology. Create standardized training programs. Your work with combat controllers shows you know how to teach, not just perform. Kira processed this. It was a hybrid role, something that didn't fit traditional military categories. Not full-time operator, not full-time instructor, but something in between. What's the command structure? She asked. Who would I report to during deployments? The operational commander, Torres said. Just like you did with Commander Castellano. You'd be attached to their unit, under their authority for the duration of the mission. But for administrative purposes, you'd still belong to your home unit. And if there's a conflict, if my commander at the training squadron needs me while I'm deployed, the operational mission takes priority. We'd work that out in advance. Ensure your regular duties are covered. Vance added, this program has support at the highest levels. Joint Chiefs are aware. Service secretaries have signed off. This isn't some experimental project that might disappear. This is a permanent capability we're building. Kiera sat back, considering. The opportunity was significant. A chance to do operational work without giving up her teaching role. But it also meant living in 2 worlds simultaneously, never fully belonging to either. Can I ask a question? She said. Of course, Torres replied. Why me specifically? There are shooters with more deployments, more experience, higher profiles. Torres smiled slightly. Because you made 2 shots that most snipers couldn't make in a high-pressure combat situation on your first deployment. Because you integrated seamlessly with a SEAL team despite having 0 prior experience working with them. Because your commander described you as unnervingly calm under fire. Those aren't common traits. Dr. Hollis added, we've also analyzed your training outcomes. Combat controllers who go through your shooting program have significantly lower failure rates in follow-on training and higher performance scores in operational assessments. You don't just shoot well, you transfer knowledge effectively. That's rare. So what do you need from me today? Kira asked. Your commitment, Torres said. If you agree to this, we'll begin the formal process. Additional training, clearances, integration exercises with various special operations units. Your life will get more complicated, but also more impactful. Kira thought about the Ridge in Afghanistan, the clarity of purpose, the immediate consequences. She thought about her students at Hurlburt, the steady work of preparing others for challenges they'd face. She thought about her father, who'd spent decades perfecting a skill just for the love of precision. He'd never had to choose between competing and teaching. He'd done both on his own terms. I'm in, she said. Torres nodded, satisfied. Good. We'll start paperwork immediately. First integration exercise is in 2 months. Army Special Forces. Cold weather training in Alaska. You'll embed with an ODA team. Work on long-range mountain shooting. Alaska in winter, Webb said with a slight smile. Hope you packed warm clothes. Kira thought of Wyoming winters. Temperatures 20 below, wind that cut through every layer. I'll manage, sir. The briefing continued for another hour, covering logistics, administrative details, training schedules. By the end, Kira had a folder full of documents and a head full of new information. As she stood to leave, Dr. Hollis approached. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever doubt? Wonder if you should be doing something else? Kira considered the question. Sometimes, usually late at night, when I'm processing a training day or thinking about deployments. What do you tell yourself? That doubt is useful. It keeps you honest, prevents complacency. But doubt without action is just anxiety. So I use it to refine my approach, improve my skills, make better decisions. Then I move forward. Hollis smiled. That's a good answer. I think you're going to do well in this program. Outside the briefing room, Kira found Blackwood waiting by the exit. She'd half expected this. You were there, she said, in the building, the whole time. I wanted to see if you'd go through with it. He studied her with those weathered eyes. Still angry about the manipulation? Kira considered the question honestly. No, sir. You gave me opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise. My father saved your life. You paid that forward. That's not manipulation. That's loyalty. Your father would have said the same thing. Blackwood extended his hand. Welcome to the program, Staff Sergeant. She shook it, feeling the weight lift. Thank you, sir, for everything. Don't thank me yet. Alaska's going to make Afghanistan look easy. She smiled. I'll manage. Driving back to her apartment that evening, Kira called her mother. How are you? Her mother asked, the question carrying layers of concern. Good. I had a meeting today about a new opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Teaching mostly, with some operational work mixed in. It's complicated. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Is it dangerous? Sometimes, but I'm good at it, Mom. Really good. I know you are. Your father would be... She trailed off. Worried, Kira offered. He always worried because he cared. Her mother's voice was softer now. I've been thinking about what you said, about important work that matters. I was angry because I'm scared, but I've been scared since your father died, and fear didn't bring him back. There was a pause, then her mother continued. Your father told me something 3 months before he died. He said, Susan, I'm teaching Kira to survive without me, to be stronger than I was, to use what I gave her for something that matters. I didn't understand then. I do now. Be careful, Mom, but also be brave. That's what he'd want. Kira felt something settle in her chest. Thank you, Mom. After hanging up, she sat in her apartment, looking at the framed photo on her bookshelf. Her father, on a Wyoming range, squinting into the sun, rifle across his shoulders. He looked relaxed, confident, at home in that landscape. She'd spent years trying to understand what drove him. The obsessive pursuit of precision, the countless hours refining technique. She thought it was about competition, about winning, but now she understood it differently. It wasn't about beating others. It was about mastering something difficult, something that demanded everything you had. It was about looking at an impossible distance and saying, I can reach that. Her phone buzzed. Text from Webb, the SEAL. Heard through the grapevine you're joining some new program. Good for you. We could use more people like you in the fight. She replied, Thanks. See you out there. Another text came through. This one from Williams, the combat controller she trained. SSGT. Dalton, just got orders for my first deployment. Afghanistan. Any last-minute advice? Kira thought carefully before responding. Trust your training. Stay alert. Take care of your team. And remember, precision isn't about being perfect. It's about being prepared when it matters most. Roger that. Thanks for everything. Her phone buzzed again. Email from her mother, not a call. Unusual. Kira, I've been thinking about what you said, about important work that matters. I was angry because I'm scared, but I've been scared since your father died, and fear didn't bring him back. Your father told me something 3 months before he died. He said, Susan, I'm teaching Kira to survive without me, to be stronger than I was, to use what I gave her for something that matters. I didn't understand then. I do now. Be careful, but also be brave. That's what he'd want. Love, Mom. Kira read it twice, feeling something settle in her chest. Her mother hadn't given blessing exactly, but she'd given understanding. And sometimes that was more valuable. Kira set down her phone and walked to her closet where her father's rifle case rested on the top shelf. She pulled it down, opened it, ran her fingers along the cold metal of the barrel. This rifle had won championships, set records, passed from father to daughter as both tool and legacy. Now it would help her train the next generation of shooters, each one carrying forward the lessons she'd learned on Wyoming ranges and Afghan ridges. The military was building something new, and she was part of it, not as a traditional operator, not as a conventional instructor, but as something in between, a specialist who could move between worlds, bringing precision where it was needed most. She thought about Castellano's words after that first operation. That's the kind of shooting that makes a difference. Making a difference. That's what her father had done in his way, pushing the boundaries of what was possible at extreme distances. That's what she would do in hers, preparing others and stepping forward when needed. Kira closed the rifle case and returned it to the shelf. Tomorrow she'd be back in a classroom, teaching fundamentals to combat controllers. Next month she'd be in Alaska with Army Special Forces in sub-zero conditions. She didn't know exactly where this path would lead, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was ready for it. Because precision wasn't just about shooting. It was about knowing your capability, understanding your purpose, executing when the moment demanded it. Her father had taught her that. The military had refined it. Afghanistan had proven it. And now she would carry it forward. One shot, one student, one mission at a time. The rifle stayed silent on its shelf, waiting, but Kira was already moving, already preparing, already focused on what came next. That was the real lesson of precision. It wasn't about the perfect shot you'd already made. It was about the next one, the one that hadn't happened yet, the one that would matter when everything else fell away, and all that remained was you, the rifle, and the impossible distance between where you were and where you needed to be. Her father used to say that excellence was practice, not destination, because the destination kept moving. There was always another ridge, another target, another moment when skill and preparation met opportunity. And when that moment came, she would be there, breathing steady, heart rate controlled, wind measured not just with instruments, but with 21 years of knowing how air moved across skin and through valleys and over mountains. She would be there because that's what her father had prepared her for. Not competition, not glory, but this, the quiet certainty that when someone needed a shot made at impossible distance, in impossible conditions, there was someone who could make it. Someone who understood that every trigger pull carried weight, that precision was responsibility, that the difference between life and death could be measured in inches and seconds, and the steadiness of a hand that had learned, through 10,000 hours of practice, what it meant to be certain. Kira turned off the lights and went to bed, but sleep didn't come immediately. Her mind was still processing the day, the briefing, Blackwood's presence, the commitment she'd made. In the darkness, her phone glowed with a final message. Email from Torres, subject line, Alaska ODA assignment, report February 15th, Fort Wainwright. She opened it. Mission parameters, weather forecasts, equipment lists, and at the bottom, a single line from Blackwood. Your father made a 3,520-yard shot in 18 miles per hour wind. Alaska will demand more. Are you ready? Kira smiled in the darkness and typed one word. Yes. She set the phone down. Tomorrow, combat controllers would learn wind reading. Next month, Alaska's mountains would test everything her father taught her. Next year, missions she couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, she was exactly where she needed to be. Between worlds, between teaching and doing, between the precision her father gave her and the purpose she'd found for it. The rifle waited on the shelf. The students waited in classrooms. The missions waited beyond horizons. And Staff Sergeant Kiera Dalton was ready for all of it, because that's what precision meant. Not the perfect shot you'd already made, but the certainty that when the impossible distance appeared, when the wind shifted, when lives depended on inches and heartbeats, there would be someone behind the rifle who'd spent 10,000 hours preparing for exactly that moment. She closed her eyes, breathing steady, heart rate controlled. Wind measured not just with instruments, but with 21 years of listening. Ready.